Well, there's the floor. Done. Heck of a job. Took them 22 hours from when they showed up to when they left. They got here a little before 7 and didn't leave till 4:30 the next day. And they pretty much worked it on, I'll say nonstop. I mean, they'd run that power trowel for 10 minutes, take a 10-minute break, run it for 10 minutes. Well, the last load of concrete got here at noon. So from noon to 4:30 the next day, they worked it. And it's just the problem they ran into was the concrete wouldn't dry quick enough or set up quick enough to be able to polish it. You know, if it was just a brush finish where they could just brush it and walk away, it would have been done way sooner. But they just, you know, it has to be pretty set up to be able to buff it like that with those power trowels. And, you know, about, I'm gonna say around 4 or 5, at one point in time, the foreman was like, hey, it's gonna be a long day. And I was like, I'm thinking maybe they'll be done at 6 or 7, you know, it's a long day for them. Normally they're out of here at 4 or 5. And about 4 or 5, he's probably like, it's gonna be a good midnight before we're out of here. I'm like, my goodness. Well, midnight came and went and they weren't even close yet. And I try to go to bed about midnight. There was no point in me staying out here watching them. Plus I had to work the next day. And so I tried going to bed. It didn't really work out very well because it was so much noise going on out here and chaos and just people talking and 2 machines running. And so I barely got any sleep that night myself. Got up about 4:30 when they were leaving. And so anyway, it was just a long day too. Throughout the pour, had some issues with getting the concrete. Worked on the front patio out here. I'll show you here in a second. But this first load, it came in 3 different trucks basically. This first one is back here, and it set up pretty quicker than what they wanted. And it ended up causing a little spot here where you can see down through here, right through here. This is basically the first load. And, you know, the second load, it was still wet when the second load got here. The problem was that the second load didn't dry enough to polish for hours and hours difference between this one. So you can imagine you're trying to polish this one. Meanwhile, this one's not even close. And so it made a situation here where you can feel it a little bit with your feet. And, you know, maybe it looks worse on the video, but you can definitely see it a little bit in the texture where they just did the best they could to try to mix them together. I mean, the trucks only came maybe 45 minutes or an hour apart, but the dry time was just way different between the two. And they don't know why. They should have all been the same mix. They put an additive in it to try to get the setup quicker. Since it was about in the 40s and 50s that day, it's nothing crazy cold, but a little colder. And so they weren't sure why that one set up so much faster than these 2 front sections. So you can kind of see the one here. These blended together a lot better on this one. But this was the second pour, and then this front area was the third. And this third one took the longest. You know, like I said, it got here at noon, and it wasn't even ready till 16 hours later to really buff it good. So anyway, I have 0 concrete experience other than a little quickcrete here and there. But so I didn't know anything about it. I just figured they'd be in and out of here and done. You know, it'd set up in a couple hours, they'd buff it and leave. And that definitely wasn't the case at all. He said that they normally do have a little bit of issue with this in the winter months, but nothing like this. He said the previous record was 10 o'clock. They got off a job one night. So this was another 6 or 7 hour job compared to what they're even used to. The worst one they've ever seen before this. So he said he set a new record for a work day for him. But they blocked off these doors, had a torpedo heater going, trying to get a little heat in here. I'm not sure how much that helped. But overall, I'm happy with it. I'm glad we got it done. You know, during the middle of the pour, the third truck, they were having issues getting the concrete. The plant was like froze up. It was kind of started out in the high 20s in the morning. They said the airline was, some sort of airlines were messed up. I don't know how they make concrete at all, but it was causing an issue, and they're worried if they could even get a third truck in here. So that was pretty stressful, thinking, my goodness, what are we gonna do? We're gonna have a cold joint that just, I don't even know how you mess with that. Have to come pour this front a different day and try to join that in. I mean, this just doesn't sound ideal. So once that third truck rolled in, I was at least happy. At least we got the concrete on site, you know. And this was just more or less a headache for them to have to sit out here and work it all evening. And I was getting a little concerned about the neighbors because, you know, I'm not real close to my neighbors distance-wise, but close enough. I mean, there's a house up on the hill there, and I think these buffers were just, the noise was just blowing out the front of this door like a trumpet, you know. It just kind of echoes towards the front. And you know, you're only supposed to build till 5, you know, what the permit says. They don't want people out here all hours of the night hammering away, nail guns going, you know, it's a city limit thing. And I got to thinking, you know, so all it takes is one person up there or any of the other directions to say, my goodness, this is out of hand. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. You know, I'm trying to sleep on a work night, and they call the police or something, and they show up and say, you guys got to shut her down, and we don't have it finished buffing yet. So that got to be a little bit of a concern of mine that I had just no control over, and just kind of had to hope for the best. And luckily, nobody called in. I don't know if it was just so by the time they got to their houses, it was so wasn't loud enough basically to matter, but or they just dealt with it and whatever. But nobody called in, nobody showed up, so that was all fine. But you know, throughout the night, I'm thinking, my goodness, surely somebody's going to get fed up with this noise and mess going on. But so anyway, there's a lot of little things that I was concerned with. So at the end of the day, it's done, it's smooth. Yeah, there's a little bit of seam you can see, but I'm not going to complain, you know. And you know, what would I even do about it? For one thing, it's not their fault per se that the concrete was different cure times. I mean, they called it in, told them what they wanted, all the same. So it's kind of the concrete company's problem. What would you do? You know, tell them, would you sue them? You know, tell them this doesn't match and blend in. Would I try to get money from the contractor and say, well, you didn't blend it right? I mean, meanwhile, I mean, I have no doubt they were giving it their all. I mean, they were out here working hard all day. So I can't really fault them. And you know, one thing about this build is doing the whole thing on a handshake, basically. I don't have any contract with them or nothing. And so all of those little things, you know, it's like, how would you ever take them to court per se? There's nothing in writing saying that it all has to blend, or, you know, I don't have any specification on all this stuff. It was just a drawing I handed them, and they gave me a quote. And so right or wrong, that's how we did it. I was a little concerned whenever at the beginning of not having a contract with a lot of detail in it. And when I started talking to the builder, the owner, he was like, you know, I really normally don't use contracts. We build entire houses, $500,000 houses without a contract usually. And I didn't want to spook him away or maybe give me a higher price, not wanting to deal with me if he thought I was going to be a real stickler on every little tiny thing. So it was kind of a judgment call I had to make, that I didn't want to lose him because he's the only guy I could find in the area to even do this. And so I just decided, well, we'll just wing it and figure it out. And so far, I'm happy. They've done everything how I told them. I mean, everything's worked out good. They showed up. They've, you know, not raised the price on me and nothing like that. So I guess ultimately it was a good decision, but it also could have came back to bite me if something just went majorly haywire and I had nothing in writing on it. Of course, they didn't have anything in writing either, so I could have just never paid them, and it would have been just as big a problem for them as other way around. So you just had to work together on it, and I kind of trusted them. I read reviews on them, looked at their Facebook page, and did the best I could to kind of evaluate them. And so anyway, that's kind of where I went with that. But my point is that even if I wasn't happy with this, there's not much I can do about it. And I think over time, you won't even notice it. I think you get working in here, get some oil on the place, and he said over time the colors will kind of blend in better. Get the car parked over there, you won't ever even notice this. But these 2 front sections do look really good and kind of match. It's just when you get to here, you start to notice a little transition. Like I said, it's still pretty smooth. I mean, it's not like rough. You could roll a creeper over it and never notice it, but they got the drains in here, and poured some water on it last night. They didn't get a ton of slope to it, decent amount, and I guess I didn't want it too much either, where the floor is kind of unlevel, where you're trying to put jacks and stuff on it. I wanted a balance there of enough for water to flow into it, but not too much. I've seen some garages that have a lot to it. So it's right on the edge of not being enough, but it does seem to flow that way. And at the end of the day, normally when you wash something, you just end up taking a squeegee and squeegeeing it into the drain. So the bottom line is I didn't want it going the wrong directions or into the walls, you know. And I think they put about an inch. It's about an inch lower in the drains and on the side. So an inch over 15 feet, something like that, which I think is fairly typical. Yeah, I showed in a previous video the anchor bolts I put in here, and I think it's all going to work out good. We do have one little crack over here starting. I don't know if you can see it right there. Not sure what's up with that, if it has anything to do with what's going on over here or not, but I think once all that locks in, it should be good. I made sure they got that mesh up against those anchor bolts really good, so it should have pretty good tensile strength in it with having that metal in there, not just concrete. There's one crack starting over here from this corner to this corner. It actually kind of ends about right there right now, but I figure eventually that'll split all the way out. They're supposed to come back today and saw the concrete, put lines in it. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I guess I'm gonna go for it. You know, some garages don't even have the cuts in it. They just let it crack naturally, and that's the end of it. So you either have a bunch of lines in the garage floor, or you just let it crack naturally and look at the cracks wherever they may go. So it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Obviously, it'd be nice if it just stayed nice and perfectly smooth forever like this, but assuming it's going to crack, you just got to decide, would you rather look at zigzag lines or would you rather look at pre-cut lines? I don't know. I guess I'll probably just have had them cut it, but that's about it. Hopefully pouring the concrete patio here soon. They ran out of good weather on that, so I'll do another video on it to kind of show what we got going on there.